Folks, welcome back to another edition of the Play Action Pod. I'm your host, Christian McCullum, and we continue, the month of March, we continue to go around the country and examine these teams that'll be competing in March Madness. Got a special guest today, Sam Basel from A10 Talk and College Hoops Digest. Sam, thanks for joining us, and tell the people where they can find you.
Thanks for having me, man. So you can find me on houseenterprise.com, where I contribute College Hoops Talk. I talk about the A10 and everything else, in college hoops. And then on A10Talk.com, you can find me talking about Fordham Hoops and hosting the A10 Talk podcast.
All right, cool. I mean, obviously, we'll talk about a lot of stuff, but A10's kind of one of your specialties. What's the outlook of the A10 right now? It looks like Davidson's at the top. It looks like a one-bid league right now. Do you think there's any way, depending on what happens to the A10 championship, it could get multiple bids?
Yeah, so the A10 has always, these last couple of years, has always been kind of a weird conference, right? I think it's a conference that's very deep. There's a lot of teams with a lot of talent, but when it comes to getting into conference play, they also tend to kind of eat each other alive. It's really hard to establish a clear favorite because all of these teams are so good at the top. Right now, Davidson is probably the clear favorite for the conference. I believe they're 15-2 in conference play. They've already clinched at least a share of the regular season championship. So if you're an A10 fan and you're looking for, the most bids out of the Atlantic 10 this year, I think what you're hoping for right now is that, Davidson continues their run and they lose in the final of the A10 tournament to a team like Dayton or St. Bonaventure, so that one of those teams gets the auto bid and then Davidson gets an at-large bid. Okay.
All right. That makes sense. Now, taking a look more, pulling back and looking more national, things are kind of, going back and forth to the top. We had Saturday where everybody lost. But, it looks like crystallizing around Gonzaga, Arizona, Kentucky as kind of the favorites with Gonzaga out there kind of by themselves. What's your thoughts on that top elite group right now heading into March?
Yeah, so it's tough. I mean, I think we're looking at something we're looking at a kind of top four that's almost shaping out to be like what it was last year. I mean, of course, you've got Gonzaga. They're always floating around the top. You could make the argument that they kind of benefit from being in the WCC. When it comes to conference play, especially when you look at the bracket layout of the WCC conference tournament, I think it's something that And the OVC too follows the same format. I think it's something that should be looked at because Gonzaga enters in the semifinals, so they're walking in and walking right out with a conference championship, no matter what. I think unless St. Mary's pulls something crazy off, but at the same time, they deserve to be in the tournament, right? They are one of the best teams in the country, but right now, I think it's looking tough. I mean, Kentucky, obviously, with guys like Oscar Tshiebwe. And I also got to give a shout-out to Kellen Grady, who's been, an excellent role player on Kentucky so far this year. He transferred from Davidson last year, where he was pretty much the star on that team for a while. And he's really, come into his own on John Calipari's roster. I think what's so interesting about Kentucky this year is, how quickly they were able to flip from, having, a pretty down season in 2020 to 2021 to be, one of the best teams in the country this season and possibly a Final Four national championship team. Oscar Tshiebwe, there's not much more to say about the guy. He's probably the front runner for the SEC Player of the Year. Just one of the most dominant players I've seen from Kentucky in a long time.
How about Arizona with first-year coach Tommy Lloyd? They've been, they've been looking really, really impressive.
Yeah, Arizona, I think, has probably been leading the resurgence of the Pac-12. We've got a lot of good teams coming out of that conference this year. Oregon's looking a lot better. Arizona State's looking a lot better. But yeah, Arizona, I think they've got a good shot.
Is there a couple teams in that next tier that you're interested in? I got a buddy who's really high on Wisconsin, and he's already told me he's taking Wisconsin in our bracket to go all the way. Is there another team or teams in that next level that you think you should keep an eye on for potential champion?
For a potential champion, it's really hard to say because I think those favorites of Gonzaga, Arizona, and Kentucky are just so strong. But I do think before there's the top guys, right? Like the blue bloods, like the Kentuckys, the Gonzagas, the Dukes. then before you get into the mid-majors, I feel like there are teams in some high major conferences that I don't know if they're, even if they're not ready to make a championship run, I think they're ready to really surprise people in this year's tournament. And right now, the team that I'm looking forward to doing that is Wake Forest out of the ACC. I have to admit, I think it's wrong that I was looking at the most recent AP Top 25 poll from this week. I think it's absolutely wrong that Wake Forest did not even get a single vote in this week's Top 25 poll. They're 24-8 in a very tough ACC this year. They just dominated a game over NC State. So I think if you're making your bracket this year, I would honestly put Wake Forest as far as like a Sweet 16 or like an Elite 8 team. You know what I mean? Other than that, I mean, there are some teams with some pretty far odds that I think are at least worth taking a look at. Of course, you've got Villanova, you've got UConn. I think the Big East is going to be a great conference this year. I don't, it's one of those things where I don't know if Duke has the potential to make a final championship run. But in Coach K's last year, I mean, I think anything's possible. You know what I mean?
Yep. These Power 5 schools, I mean, they have so much talent. Even if they're having a down year, I mean, they can just get hot and go, right? So, I mean, those teams are stacked with talent when they put it together. There can be no stopping them. I mean, you look at UCLA last year; they made a deep run. So, how about mid-majors though? Is there some mid-major teams that people probably are less aware of that could make a similar type run?
Yeah, so in terms of mid-majors, there are a lot of teams that I think people should really be looking forward to. Of course, right now, considering the way that a lot of mid-major tournaments shake out, a lot of mid-major conferences tend to be one bid leagues. So a lot of these teams that I'm going to mention right now, are on the conditional that they have to make the tournament first. You know what I mean? But I think a lot of these guys do have a good chance. First up. I'm a New York City guy, so I have to be a little biased here. I would love to see Wagner head into the tournament out of the NEC. Earlier in the season, they've had a really, really great regular season. They beat VCU in non-conference play. That was a huge get for them. And then when they entered NEC play, they went on a 12-game win streak. And just really dominated over some teams like LIU, St. Francis, St. Peter's. They did not win the NEC regular season championship. They lost that to Bryant. But those teams are pretty much poised to, meet each other in the NEC final. And so whoever comes out of that, I think is going to be a really strong, exciting team. They'll probably be somewhere around like a 13-14 seed. But, look for them to, possibly pull up a big upset if they end up in the bracket. The other conference that I think is poised to, send a very strong team into the NCAA tournament is the Missouri Valley Conference. Right now, there's kind of a top three of Drake, UNI, that's Northern Iowa, and Loyola Chicago. Loyola Chicago obviously kind of got famous a couple years back for making the Final Four. I believe that was in 2017 or 2018. They had that mascot, Sister Jean, who's the nun on campus. That is just such a fun conference, and just three really, really talented teams that I think, it's kind of anyone's game. With Loyola Chicago specifically, I think this is kind of a really big year for them. They really want to secure that conference championship because it's actually their final year in the Missouri Valley, because next year they're going to be heading into the A-10. I think there was a little bit of, with any conference move, I feel like it kind of sparks a bit of a beef from some other teams in the conference, like, oh, why are you leaving us? We're better off without you anyway. The A-10's not that great. So I think this is really the year for Loyola Chicago to be like, look, we've had a good time in this conference, but, we deserve that next step up, and we deserve to, win this conference and make a move and continue to improve this program. So I think they have a lot to be playing for. So if you got a chance to watch the MVC conference tournament this weekend, I highly recommend it.
Sam, one other question. I'm a UMass guy. I'm a UMass grad, Massachusetts native. UMass obviously just announced they fired Matt McCall. Any thoughts on that, potential coaching candidates, and what, any thoughts in general on the Matt McCall era?
Yeah, it's really hard to say. I think Matt McCall, entered UMass with a lot of potential. But I think, things just did not really shake out the way that they were supposed to. Obviously, I think from what I've heard, there was kind of some lines drawn in the sand, in terms of some players, how they felt about Coach McCall and some of the other assistants. One thing that really kills a head coaching tenure, and myself, I'm a Fordham guy, so I'm pretty familiar with this when I was at Fordham, is that when you're a coach and a lot of the talent that you bring in ends up transferring to other schools, that bodes really bad for the future of your program. I mean, we saw with Jeff Neubauer, a lot of guys at Fordham were, ended up transferring and winning at other schools. I mean, look at a guy like Eric Pascal, right? He played like 2 years at Fordham, went to Villanova, won a national championship, and now is kind of hopping around the NBA and other professional basketball circles. So with Matt McCall, I think it was a very similar thing when you look at what happened with Trey Mitchell, him going over to Texas. And I just think, UMass is one of those programs, right? They're one of the more storied programs in the Atlantic 10. Obviously, you had that era with Coach Calipari. So they kind of expect a lot. In terms of head coaching candidates, it's really hard to say. He's one of those guys that I think people always float around when there's a head coaching vacancy, that being Rick Pitino.
Yeah.
I think people are really looking for a guy like Rick Pitino
That's
to
who,
take over the program.
That's who I would like, but apparently he's got a massive buyout at Iona.
Yeah, so, I've been following a lot of Iona hoops this year, and I don't see Pitino leaving Iona anytime soon for a couple of reasons. Iona's doing really good in the MAC right now. Pitino took over a very good Iona team. When he took over, they were the reigning MAC champions. And he's only been able to improve them even further. So, yes, you might not be getting, the best competition you can in a conference like the MAC. I mean, the MAC's a great conference, but, it's no ACC. It's no Big East. But if you're the best conference in the MAC every year, you're continuously getting into the NCAA tournament and improving and playing top teams in maybe a non-conference play in the tournament later on. So there's really no reason for Pitino to really want to seek out that much greater of a competition. B, like you said, I mean, from what I've heard, they're potentially working on a lifetime contract for Pitino at Iona. I think he's really enjoyed being at this program. I think, they enjoy having him. So I don't really see him leaving anytime soon. I would love to see, actually, also from the MAC, as a potential candidate for UMass's next head coaching opportunity, is Shahid Holloway. When Fordham had that head coaching vacancy last season, I think he was a name that was kind of floating around. He's the head coach of St. Peter's over in the MAC. And, I think, yes, he is also another young coach, so there's still a lot that can go wrong in a career like Holloway's. But I think if UMass really wants to, double down on these young guys, I think he'd be a great choice.
Yeah. McCall hitched his wagon to that, Trey Mitchell and that Woodstock Academy crew, and it didn't work out well for him. So, all right, Sam. Well, hey, man, we really appreciate it. Let everyone know again where they can find you.
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Sam12878. I'm usually just, rambling about Fordham hoops on there, but you can also find me on houseenterprise.com talking about, A10 hoops, Bubble Talk, and NYC-based hoops, and also on A10talk.com, where I run the podcast, as well as, I give updates on everything going on in the world of Fordham basketball. Thanks
a lot, Sam. We'll be checking in. We'll be following your coverage and checking back in with you as the month of March continues.
Thank you.